From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones.
As soon as you get off the plane, you know you're in Britain. Because everyone's a little bit grumpy, everyone's moody, everyone's telling you what to do. You get into an altercation in your car and they're throwing the middle finger up at you.
That famous British sunny disposition. This is Dan. He's a physiotherapist and content creator and had had enough of home.
So I qualified as a physiotherapist about 4 years ago. Got thrown into the NHS, did my rotations, did a little bit of private work, lived with mum and dad, brother who's my best mate. Everything on paper looked great, but something wasn't quite right. I tried a bunch of things, to be honest. Tried starting my own business, my own physiotherapy practice. It was good for a while, but it didn't fix the problem. I then went traveling, so me and my now fiance. At the end of that trip, it was like something changed, like something flipped in our brains, and we realized that there was more to the world. There was more to life, there was more to explore. It made me think maybe I'm in the wrong place.
He moved to the Gold Coast in Australia last year and is part of an outward trend. There's been a fivefold increase in 25 to 34-year-old British nationals leaving the UK since 2022. Where are they going? Why are they going? Are they gone forever? And what is the problem with the UK anyway? The story today, why young, high-achieving Brits are leaving the UK. When I spoke to Dan, he was still very down on life in the UK.
So I guess at the time it was just the fact that I'd always be waiting for weekend and I'd never be enjoying like the weekdays, and I'd always be chasing something that was in the future and not living for now. And I think that was largely because I just didn't make enough money as a physio. I was trying to save for a house, I was trying to do things on weekends, but it was always wet, it was always cold, and we couldn't go out and spend money because it was too expensive to do it. I was probably working 60-hour weeks just to be able to afford to save for a house and do all the usual life stuff that everyone does. But I think it's also the culture. But I don't think the culture is the problem. I think the culture is the symptom. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit ignorant to politics, but I think the economy in the UK right now is causing people to be a little bit negative and maybe not live the life that they want.
Sorry to drill into the numbers. Like, what would you have earned on the NHS and what are you earning now in Australia?
So at the time I'd just gone into paediatrics, so it was quite a specialised role as a physio. I was getting paid about £30,000 a year, minus tax. I moved to Australia and immediately that increased to somewhere in the realm of 60 to 65,000 for the same experience, the same person doing the same job, and over double the salary, plus pension. They pay pension on top of your salary.
The thing that would hold me back, though, from it, as lovely as Australia sounds, is missing out on British culture, by which I don't necessarily just mean sort of what's on iPlayer, but the conversation, the discourse, that sort of shared cultural history and community. Do you miss out on that?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't. Every now and then I'll think about Greg's and just think...
okay, not where my mind
well, I know
immediately went.
Yeah. Every now and then one of my mates that I went to uni with, he'll come out with a one-liner that I just think you'd only ever hear that in Britain. That's a northern British bit of banter, and yes, you do miss that.
And your family must miss you as well.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, because it's tough. Some days it's fine, and you get to chat to them over FaceTime, and some days you're just crying because you just want to give your mum a hug, and you can't.
Dan, 28 years old and out on the Gold Coast. Back in sunny London, where you could almost be in the Gold Coast, I spoke to a Times colleague who has been looking at this particular migration trend.
I mostly write about China, but I'm always trying to think about other things that's on my mind or that perhaps aren't really covered in the paper by the other columnists.
Cindy Yu is contributing editor and columnist at The Times.
And I just realised that actually one thing that kept coming up between me and my friends when we were getting together was, we would kind of talk about how rubbish things were in this country in a kind of maybe a sign of our aging.
Yeah.
It was bettering our day. But B, then we would be like, is there somewhere better we should go to? And I should caveat that by saying that we are university educated, mostly white collar workers, now in our early 30s, so maybe got some 10 years of career time under our belts. And now feeling relatively financially independent enough to be able to move should we want to. And so feeling like, what is this really the kind of the stock that we're left with? Or can we actually do something more? Can we have a better life somewhere else?
And this phenomenon isn't just limited to your friendship group.
No, it's not. And so when I started digging into it a bit more, I found that actually, first of all, the Office for National Statistics have changed the way they deal with migration data in the last few years. So it's a little bit confusing. But even with the new metrics, it's possible to see that actually the number of 25 to 34-year-old British nationals that we are losing as a country, so they might have emigrated but they're not coming back, so the net loss has increased from 6,000 in 2022 to 30,000 last year. So just to reiterate, so that's the number of British nationals who have left the country who have not come back, basically.
And they're going where?
So again, the ONS is not very good at tracking this, but anecdotally and through various different surveys, consumer surveys, for example, it seems that they go to Australia, the UAE and the US.
Quite a mix. Let's get into some of those places then and why they might be attracting people. Australia. Beaches and sunny weather and excellent breakfast culture aside, what's the draw? Or maybe that is the draw?
Yeah, it's Neighbours and Baywatch.
Yeah.
No, it's I think that is very much a large part of the draw, especially for younger people who are, bored of this kind of weather and didn't wait until the UK also had 40-degree heat. If only they'd waited. But I think that is definitely a big part of the draw. But also, it's not trivial to say the weather is good. It's about leaving the office and feeling like you can go to the beach, that you're not timed out by about 5 o'clock because it's got dark. But more materially, for certain industries, treatment is better in Australia. Let's say if you're a doctor, the average first-year doctor earns about £47,000 in Australia, but it would be about £38,000 in the UK. And then there's other kind of peripheral stuff like treatment of doctors as well, where of course we know in the UK junior doctors haven't been happy for a long time. And then as well as the higher pay for certain industries, there's also lower income tax. So your take-home pay feels like more. I think that higher pay for certain industries, lower income tax, as well as just kind of Australia doing deliberate things to attract young British people, having really good visa schemes. I have friends who have gone over, for example, and done like kind of temporary worker scheme where they were picking fruit, but then that kind of develops into more of a worker scheme. And they find all of that kind of generally quite welcoming.
And I remember actually on the radio a while ago, I was doing a thing about, I think it was New South Wales as the state in Australia, like doing an active direct marketing campaign to medics in the UK, pitching this. So there's all the advantages and also they're trying to make it happen. What about the UAE?
Yeah, the UAE is a funny one. We always like to be quite snooty about, Dubai, and we got so much of that when the Iran war started and there was so much kind of press coverage of like, these people are coming back from
all those
Dubai.
influencers.
Yes, exactly.
Unable to post on Instagram about the missiles hitting various buildings.
I'm very sympathetic towards that kind of snobbery at the same time. I also have friends who've gone to, a friend's sister's gone to Abu Dhabi. She was a teacher in the UK. And she's a teacher in Abu Dhabi now at an international school. And basically what that industry does is cater towards the British diaspora and the English-speaking diaspora who are there now, who have international schools, want their kids to grow up speaking English. And so they're like employing lots of real English teachers and they get paid much more. Famously, the UAE is a tax haven. So no income tax, inheritance tax, capital gains, blah, 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 blah. And depending on where you are, property costs can also be lower. And then again, the greater lifestyle as well, as long as you're not slagging off the UAE government.
I was going to say, as long as you haven't got any complaints.
Right.
And yeah, I can sort of get my head around those two, Australia and the UAE, for the various reasons that you've highlighted there. The US is an interesting one, especially because when, you're consuming news, it seems like the cost of living there is quite high. Yes, they pay fabulous salaries, but also it seems quite a tense, fractious place to go to, and yet people are moving.
Yeah, I guess as an immigrant, and I should say again, check your privilege, as a white-collar immigrant, that kind of politics maybe doesn't impact your life that much. So I think for the US, the retraction is that the US of OECD countries is still one of the biggest countries that is growing. There was an interesting survey that came out earlier this year from the Institute of Economic Affairs where they asked Brits where they thought they lay in terms of wealth and GDP per capita compared to American states. And Brits thought they were maybe the 7th most wealthy American state. But actually, in reality, GDP per capita shows that we are poorer than all American states. And of course, GDP per capita is not the only measure of wealth and how great you're feeling. Americans are spending much more money on health insurance if they can afford health insurance at all, whereas we have the NHS. But I think it goes to show that we don't quite have a good sense of how far American growth has outstripped the UK and Europe's in general, especially since the financial crisis. And so actually there's now a bit of a gap of about $23,000 of GDP per capita in the UK compared to the US. So it's stuff like that translates then into higher pay. You know, in journalism, Luke, if you and I were going to get this job in the US, we would be paid at least 1.5 or maybe even 2 times more than what we're paid now. I don't know what you're paid. And I don't know if our bosses are listening to this.
They should be. But also interesting that the US, the UAE, Australia, very English language friendly.
Yeah.
I guess there must be places which economically would be worth our while moving to, our age and stage, but just we don't have very good Japanese.
I'm sure. Well, yeah, no, totally. I mean, I speak Chinese, so I played around with the idea of moving to China before I got deeper and deeper into the journalism career, because that would be a bit tricky in China,
Yeah, exactly.
I think. But if I weren't doing this job and if I didn't care about freedom of speech as a matter of course, then China would be a very good place for me to go. Cost of living is really low. I mean, they actually have a deflation problem at the moment, not an inflation problem. And especially if you're going to be employed by a kind of a foreign company, then your income would be much higher. So our standard of living is much greater. And I think this is an interesting part about the British experience of this, because actually Brits are famously monolingual. I think 2/3 of Brits don't speak a second language, which doesn't sound like that much, but then you compare it to Europe, where like 95% of Dutch people or something, speak English. For those kind of people, maybe they have more options.
All of this, though, is predicated on the assumption that the UK is dreadful
Yes.
and worth leaving. Can we get into that? If you think about jobs and the availability of jobs, the vibe you get is that people are struggling, but is that really the case here in the UK?
Yeah, well, so the job market is very tough at the moment, not least because of the entrance, I think, of AI. And we haven't fully understood the impact of that, but we have seen so many kind of the big companies employing less starter jobs, basically, because actually once upon a time that would have been human and now it's been automated. So the ONS says that the number of job vacancies has fallen to its lowest level for 5 years. The number of new recruits was also at a 5-year low, according to HMRC. And unemployment is up a bit. And we also, of course, know about the NEETs problem as well, 1 million young people not in employment or education. So I think for a new starter in the job market, it is really tough at the moment. But I think for people who are further along the kind of the job career path, who have tried their hand at looking for jobs and tried their hand at jobs here, it's not that they don't have a job. It's just that their income isn't nearly as good as they can get somewhere else. Because since the financial crisis, the UK has just barely grown in productivity or real wages. The Resolution Foundation found that actually that kind of tapering off has cost the average worker £10,000 than if the UK kept on its pre-financial crisis trajectory. And the problem with that is that actually other countries have recovered faster, and the US, I think, is one of them.
The other stress then on the pocket is also the tax system. And we keep talking about how the tax burden currently is the biggest since the end of the Second World War. Yet actually broadly, the average worker isn't paying historically high amounts of tax. But I guess if you're that maybe affluent, particularly mobile worker hoping to get on a bit further, the tax system does have various quirks and tricks which stress you out.
100%. And I think it's worth saying as well, on that tax burden, some of this is invisible. So fiscal drag has been happening for the last 5 years, which is the freezing of tax thresholds. Under Rachel Reeves' last budget, she's frozen it until 2031. Who knows if Andy Burnham will change that under John Healey. But what that means is that basically 5 million more people are paying income tax now than they should be if the tax threshold had risen up with inflation. And 5 million more people are also in a higher 40p tax rate. So people are paying more taxes because the tax-free allowance isn't rising with their income. But the anomaly that you're pointing to, and again, I don't want listeners to think that this is a small violin. I think my point here is that for really aspiring, relatively successful and young-ish workers who are starting families, this is a punitive system. And I know that's a very privileged class already. At the same time, that is the class that are the most contributive to society, both in terms of tax revenue and in terms of productivity. So the anomaly here is that between £100,000 and £125,000, the tapering off of that personal allowance actually means that you have a marginal tax rate of 62%. And so that's actually higher than people who earn over £125,000. So actually for that £25,000 tax band, you are paying more than the richest in society. And if you're in a couple where one of you is reaching that £100,000 threshold, but the other one isn't, your child-free allowances also go. So that's left some really bizarre situations where people are actually trying to very hard to be just under that £100,000 threshold. So I've got a friend who is no longer a civil servant. He used to be a senior civil servant, got a promotion, fantastic, took him into that threshold. He has a young child. And what did he do? He actually took himself down to a 4-day week in order to be under the £100,000 and spent the extra day with his kid. Lovely for him, not great for the economy.
Wow. And assuming you get to a point where you've got a job, the tax system isn't stressing you out particularly, you're being paid what you want, maybe you don't have student debt. Another big problem here is just housing. You mentioned the cost of living already, but just the cost of renting or even then putting down a deposit and actually affording the mortgage to buy somewhere, people are still struggling with.
Yeah, in London, the average one-bed flat now costs more than half of your median pre-tax pay. And that's pre-tax. So post-tax, that's going to be a bit higher than that as well.
In rent?
Rent, just in rent. And then that's London. Of course, London, as we know, is a housing bubble. But in the rest of England, it's 42%. That's still pretty high. And so what you actually get is actually house affordability when you look at disposable income is the most unaffordable. I think it's about 125 years. The average property costs 7 times the average full-time salary in England, or 10 times the average salary in London. So basically, for our generation, unless you have a partner and or parents who will help you, don't even think about buying a house. And then there's, of course, manipulations in the housing market itself, like stamp duty, which kind of punishes people from loosening up that housing market. So it's not happy days at the moment. I don't feel like, from my kind of friendship groups, from the kind of anecdotal stories, we know we've got a very good kind of career and income and all sorts of stuff, but it is just that if you're mobile enough to consider a better life somewhere else, why shouldn't you?
Can we start, Jessica? Just so we've got it on tape, could you introduce yourself for us? All your names, who you are, where you are.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a doctor who moved from the NHS to Australia. I'm currently living in between Melbourne and the UK.
I always remember Dame Edna Everage saying that Melbourne is a city wanting to be a British suburb. Is that right?
That's actually really, really accurate.
Rewind for us what it was like in the UK. I guess, did you train as a doctor there?
Yeah, so I trained as a doctor in the UK. I went to Bristol University and then I moved to Liverpool to do our foundation training for 2 years. And then straight after my what we call foundation year 2, I moved to Australia. So that was back in September 2022.
And when you were working as a doctor in the UK, how was the work and how was your life around it?
Casting my mind back, it was 2020, so I actually graduated in the year of COVID. So I think I had a bit of a strange entrance into the NHS. The rota was very strange. We were always being moved. There was often skeleton staffing, things like that. But yeah, overall, of course, like the people and the colleagues I was working with, they were all fantastic, but it was sort of a more difficult environment to get into work. So I'll be honest, I didn't actually start looking for a job in the UK after foundation year 2. I wanted to go to Australia. It'd been something that had been on my mind for a long time, before university even, because I'd visited Australia and I did want to go back. I'd heard from quite a few colleagues and friends of friends what it was like out there. And it felt sort of like this dream world, essentially. Just a bit of an escape for at least a year. And yeah, it's somehow been 4. So still going.
And I can understand the pull, but what were the push factors?
Quite a few things, I think, for me. The taxes are high. I mean, they're also high in Australia too, but I think because you earn less overall in the UK, that can affect your lifestyle. It's just the whole of the UK at the moment feels to me like a bit messy and a bit complicated, whether that's politics, the NHS as well. Also, not going to bash the NHS, but the staffing did cause stresses. There were long days, they could be very stressful, especially when I was working in the emergency department. The waits would be very long. Patient stresses, of course, we absorb that all the time, but they'd be obviously increased hour by hour as patients were waiting. Also, it's just not enough jobs for doctors that are being made. We're seeing a lot of doctors struggling to get jobs, and my partner included applied for 50 jobs for what we call a clinical teaching fellow job in the UK this year. And all these people who are very qualified and even overqualified for these jobs applying in droves, and unfortunately there's only one place. I think that's really off-putting when you've spent so long training, and that's why a lot of people are moving. I often do ask my friends, what is it actually like working in the NHS now? Is it any different? And the friends who are in training at the moment say it's actually okay, but some of them also say they just want to get to the end of training and then work part-time, and they don't want to deal with the politics of working in a system that is slightly broken.
And now you're doing that in Australia. Have you found that's different for the better?
I definitely do think it is, yeah. Overall, the patient workload was much less, the staffing was much better, you're paid much more than you would have been at the same level back in the NHS, and the hours are much shorter. So yeah, a bit of a no-brainer. It has been really good.
And away from work, I mean, what has the lifestyle change been like? Our image of how Australians live is that they're always up at the crack of dawn, jogging, having hearty breakfasts, and just generally living a fabulous life in the sunshine. Is that what it is?
That's exactly it, Luke. I recommend. Well, I think that is very much a Sydney lifestyle.
Yes.
Perth as well, actually. But yeah, of course, the days are much sunnier. You feel like because you're working less, you have more energy and more time to do things.
Do they need podcast hosts in Australia, do you think?
Yeah, they do. They definitely do. I'll ask around for you.
Do you think you'll be back in the UK full time at any point?
Yeah, this has been something that's definitely been on my mind for the past couple of years. Everyone I did move over with in 2022, they've all moved back. The ones who stay, I think, are the ones who have an Australian partner or get permanent residency. But yeah, I think my partner is moving back to the UK, and so we will also have to navigate that. And I think eventually I will move back to the UK as well. It's one of those things that you have to think about the pros and cons. Aging parents, friends, milestones, they all, build up and they all matter. So we're back soon, but we'll never close the door on Australia, I think.
Jess, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Luke. Nice to speak to you.
Cindy, we keep laying this disclaimer on thick, but we should again be clear that this is a section of the age demographic, or particularly successful or mobile or sort of moneyed end of it, who are able to do this. If we actually zoom out and look at the sort of broader migration picture, what is actually happening? Is there as much churn and movement?
Yeah, so actually annual emigration has increased drastically since the 2010s. So in the 2010s, it was hovering around 150,000 Brits a year was leaving the country. Now that's more likely to be 250,000 Brits a year leaving the country, and that's basically since the pandemic. Of course, we know about the immigration problem we're having, and actually we've had record immigration, the so-called Boris wave, although last year's data looks a little bit different than that. And that is also a confusing picture because of students coming in who I personally don't think should be included in that figure because they leave after a few years. In any case, what we're seeing is basically a lot more Brits leaving and a lot more immigrants coming in who are often basically lower skilled. And I think that is a crux of why so much of this has become so politically toxic.
Just finally, though, is there a type of person who can actually make these moves away from the spreadsheet? If you're younger and you haven't got kids and maybe you haven't rooted in a place, it's easier to go. But also into that equation, you do need to take culture and the fabric of society that you want to live in. Andy Burnham, we keep being told, is about the politics of place and the impact that has. And there are many people who might not just want to float around wherever makes their Excel spreadsheet happiest.
So, of course, there are people like that. I am just really kind of talking about a sliver of privileged young mid-career people. And then I also have friends within that sliver who have gone abroad and really, really miss it in the UK. So I've got a friend in America who, whenever she comes back, she's like, oh, it's so nice to hang out with Brits, because Americans, they can only have organised fun. And then when she comes back, it's just so nice to be organically with Brits.
And we should finally end on an optimistic note. You fit into this category where you could be moving anywhere. You said you're British Chinese, so China could be an option. There might be economic benefits to that. Make the case for staying, because you have done that.
Yes, of course. No, I really good. Thank you for asking me this question, because I don't want to come off as criticising the UK for everything. You know, I love Britain.
Just 30 minutes of Cindy just
La, la, la.
ripping the crap out of the country. Go on.
No, the UK is amazing, and London is such a brilliant place to live. And as I get older and explore the city and the country more, outside of London, you know, actually since the pandemic, my partner and I have done much more kind of staycations. You know, we went to Somerset, we went to Yorkshire, all these places where you drive around and you see the local countryside, and it's beautiful. And then in London itself, what an international city. The food is amazing, the culture is amazing, the amount of plays that are going on, museums, exhibitions, all sorts of stuff. It is an amazing place to live if you can afford it. That is the main clincher of all of this, if you can afford it. But of course, if my partner got a job in America, we would really go. But it would be a really, really
hard. I said
hard.
end on an optimistic note, and you just turned it round to say you're off to the
But
US.
then I think that we would probably come back because we'd want our kids not to be Americans.
Good save. Good save. All right. We'll forgive you on that point. Cindy, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Cindy Yu, columnist and contributing editor at The Times and The Sunday Times. And our two Brits abroad were physiotherapist Dan Lowe and Dr. Jessica Yee. That is it from us. The story at thetimes.com is our email address should you wish to get in touch. Maybe you yourself are a Brit who has fled for sunnier or economically happier climes. Let us know. Today's producers were Olivia Case, Jennifer Kennedy and Shabnam Grewal. The executive producers were Taryn Siegel and Sophie McNulty. Sound design was by Dave Creasy and theme composition was by Mal Assetto. I'm Luke Jones. See you soon.